The morning heat rose early over the Arizona flats, turning the air into a wavering haze that shimmered above the dirt. The sound of rifle fire echoed across the range, sharp cracks, followed by the metallic clang of missed steel. A Marine at the line adjusted his M40A6, exhaled, and tried again. The shot hit wide. The spotter called it low right, his tone flat. Rehearsed. Dust kicked up from the berm, drifting back into the air like the memory of failure. The crowd shifted on the bleachers, unsure if they should cheer, laugh, or stay quiet. The wind came in lazy curls, tugging at the flags and pushing the smell of burnt powder through the tents. Marines rotated through the benches, each one trying to beat the gusts, each one falling short. The captain stood near the firing line with his arms crossed, watching with the kind of pride that tightens the jaw. His voice cut through the noise, clipped orders about adjusting elevation and holding wind. Still, the steel stayed silent. The only rhythm on the range came from frustration, metal, and the dry whisper of sand against boots. By the vendor tent, a woman in a faded navy cap poured water into paper cups. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow, skin marked by sun and small scars. She moved quietly, unnoticed, the kind of person people see but don't register. When the next shooter missed and no one stepped up, she set the tray down. The crowd murmured, waiting. She raised one hand, steady and calm, and spoke with the clear tone of someone used to being heard. "Sir, may I borrow your rifle?" The captain turned, half amused, half offended, while the spotter froze mid-motion. For a heartbeat, the range went still, caught between disbelief and curiosity. As the quiet woman met the silence head-on, Tessa Rowe lived in the kind of town where the wind carried more dust than news. Sierra Vista. Arizona was quiet, half-baked in sunlight. The kind of place where people worked early and went home tired, but content. She was 35, with steady hands and the quiet strength of someone who never needed to prove anything. 6 days a week, she stood behind the counter at Red's Hardware, surrounded by the smell of oil, sawdust, and metal. Customers came in asking about screws, paint, or drill bits, and she answered without hurry. Her tone calm and sure. Her hands bore the marks of real work, small white scars and faint burns that hinted at a different kind of precision than measuring pipe fittings. The men who came in to buy cleaning patches or scope mounts never guessed that she had once trained the people who trained them. Years ago, before the quiet life, Tessa worked as a civilian ballistics consultant at the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit at Fort Benning, Georgia. Her job wasn't glamorous, but her insight changed how shooters read wind and light. She taught instructors how to interpret mirage, how to trust the far flag, how to hear the air shift before it moved their round. Her lectures were methodical, her field sessions exact. Even the most seasoned snipers listened when she spoke. But all that ended after a training accident on the range that took one soldier's career and left her with a pale scar across her right knuckle. She didn't fight the investigation, didn't make excuses. When it was over, she packed her gear, signed the papers, and walked away. Now her morning started before sunrise. She ran along the river path when the sky was still pale gray, moving with the rhythm of someone keeping silence in check. After work, she'd go home to the small one-story house she shared with her mother, a retired nurse with kind eyes and a slow limp. On Sundays, when the wind was too dry to run, Tessa took out her old cleaning kit, oiled her brushes, polished her rods, then put them away again without ever lifting a rifle. She told herself it was habit, not memory. But deep down, she knew it was her way of staying close to what once defined her: the stillness before a shot, the patience of perfect aim. By 10:30 that morning, the fundraiser match was in full swing under the Arizona sun. The range shimmered with heat, the air carrying the scent of dust and burnt powder. The event was meant to raise money for a veteran rehabilitation center, and the crowd was full of families, kids with flags, and Marines proud to represent their unit. Rows of M40A, 6 rifles sat on the benches, their barrels glinting silver in the light. Each shot cracked through the dry air like a hammer against steel, followed by the sharp voice of the spotter calling low right or off steel. At first, the mood was bright, full of cheers and laughter between shots, but as the sun climbed higher, the air thickened and the rhythm began to falter. Rounds started drifting off target, some wide enough to draw uneasy looks from the bleachers. The captain stood behind the line, barking short orders, his jaw tight with pride. "It's the wind," he said flatly. "Adjust elevation. Compensate." But the frustration was spreading faster than the dust. The spotter hesitated, his call softer. Now, as if trying to make the misses sound less painful, Tessa stood near the vendor tent, her eyes following the targets. She didn't need a scope to see the problem. The bipod mounts were over-torqued, binding the rifles tight enough that the barrels shifted as they heated. It was small, but enough to throw the shots right. She stepped forward, her voice calm, suggesting that the mounts might be the issue. The captain barely turned his head, smirking. "Hardware tips won't save Marine rifles." "Ma'am." A few Marines laughed quietly, but she only nodded and stepped back. When the next shot went wide and no one volunteered for another try, she set down her water tray. Her voice carried clear through the heat. "Sir, may I borrow your rifle?" The captain faced her fully this time, smiling in disbelief. "You plan to outshoot Marines." She met his eyes and answered softly, "No, sire. I just want to show you why they're missing." The laughter stopped. The crowd fell still. Even the wind seemed to wait. The air on the range had gone still by the time the captain gave his nod. The crowd leaned forward, phones half raised, waiting for a show they didn't yet understand. Tessa walked to the bench with slow, unhurried steps, her boots crunching lightly against the gravel. The M40A6 sat waiting, its barrel glinting under the noon sun. The smell of hot steel and gun oil heavy in the air. She crouched beside it, one knee in the dust, her movements clean and methodical. She began with the bipod, loosening the torque just enough for the rifle to breathe. With each recoil, her fingers moved with instinctive precision, tightening, adjusting, testing the give. She checked the bubble level, then flattened the bipod legs so the rifle rested naturally against the earth. Her thumb ran over the stock, feeling the faint warmth of use. Then she lifted the bolt, glanced at the chamber, and eased around into place, locking it down with the quiet click of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. Safety on. Her hand lingered a moment on the bolt handle, not from hesitation, but from habit, the rhythm of preparation carved into muscle memory. The wind flags out on the range fluttered unevenly, the nearest whipping one way while the farthest leaned the other. Tessa's eyes followed the far one, watching its rhythm, reading the air, like a familiar script. The mirage shimmered along the desert floor, bending the light into slow waves. She inhaled once, steady, and exhaled through her nose, the motion small but controlled. Behind her, the captain stood with arms crossed, expression tightening. The smirk that once held confidence now flickered with curiosity. The spotter lowered his binoculars slightly, his brow furrowed as he recognized her method. Tessa lowered herself into the prone position, her body aligning naturally behind the rifle, elbows dug into the dirt, her legs spread just right for stability. She adjusted the stock against her shoulder, cheek resting on the comb, eyes down the optic. Everything about her form spoke of training, not performance. The crowd had gone silent now, not from politeness, But from something closer to awe, the range officer glanced toward the captain, who gave a short nod. His voice carried steady across the quiet. "Range hot," Tessa answered with one simple nod. Her eyes already on the target. Her breathing, the only sound she allowed herself to hear. The range fell into a silence so deep that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Heat shimmered across the desert floor, bending the light into liquid waves. Tessa watched the far flag twitch left. Then pause. The faintest movement, enough to tell her what she needed. Her breathing slowed. The sound of her heartbeat steady beneath the weight of the rifle. The trigger rested against her finger. The first stage held in the soft pressure between patience and release. She exhaled halfway, eyes steady through the scope. The rifle cracked. The sound was sharp, slicing through the stillness. "Un moment la terre." The steel downrange rang with a clean, centered tone that echoed like a bell. The spotter jerked slightly, lowering his binoculars. His voice caught somewhere between disbelief and awe as he muttered the word "hit." "Center." The captain blinked, his smirk thinning into a straight line as if trying to decide whether to call it skill or luck. The crowd didn't move. Even the dust hung suspended, waiting for something that might never happen again. Tessa worked the bolt with smooth control. The sound of metal on metal, precise and quiet. She didn't rush, didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the stares. Another round slid into place, the rifle steady against her shoulder. Her second shot broke the air, followed by that same bell-like ring of impact. The sound carried through the heat, pure and undeniable. Around here, the laughter that had colored the morning faded. The crowd sat frozen, caught between doubt and something that felt like reverence. In that moment, every eye followed her, not to see if she could hit again, but to understand how she had already changed the air around them. After the second shot, something changed in the air. The tension that had hung over the range shifted into silence. Not the uneasy kind, but the heavy calm that settles when people realize they are watching something extraordinary. Tessa moved as if she and the rifle were one thing, her breathing the metronome of the moment. The heat shimmered around her, but she seemed untouched by it, steady and deliberate. Her next shot broke the stillness again. Another perfect strike. Then another, and another. The spotter began to count softly under his breath, his voice blending with the rhythm of her shots. 5, 10, 15. Each motion was measured, never rushed. She adjusted the stock against her shoulder, a quarter inch at most, and shifted her elbow slightly to maintain balance. Between each shot, she exhaled slow and even, her lips barely moving. The bolt clicked open and closed with the same sound every time, the metallic whisper of repetition born from years of practice. The far wind flag fluttered unevenly, yet she seemed to read it like a familiar book. The ballistic computer at the table flashed numbers that she ignored. Instead, she watched the mirage through her scope, letting the heat's distortion tell her what the air would do before the bullet left the barrel. By the 20th shot, the rhythm had overtaken everything else. The sound of steel ringing downrange had become a pulse that the whole crowd moved with. The children in the stands stopped fidgeting, their eyes wide and unblinking. The spotter no longer called corrections. He only whispered confirmations. The captain's crossed arms dropped to his sides, his face unreadable as realization replaced pride. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't adjusting by chance. She was controlling every variable in real time, making micro-corrections so natural they looked like instinct. The wind shifted again, light and deceptive. She paused mid-breath, read the flags, and made a minute-hold adjustment left. Her shot broke a moment later, the steel answering with another flawless note. The spotter whispered that she's reading the wind, not the data, and the Marines beside him nodded quietly. No one spoke after that. The rhythm of precision had taken over the range, a pattern of calm control that felt almost sacred. with every impact. The crowd seemed to breathe with her. Caught between reverence and disbelief, the echo of each shot lingered longer than sound should, as if the desert itself was listening. The lieutenant colonel in the bleachers lowered his binoculars for a moment, rubbing his eyes as if trying to focus. Then he lifted them again, studying the line of the shooter's body. The small scar along her right knuckle, the way she adjusted the rifle between breaths. Recognition hit him slowly, a quiet wave of memory that pulled him years back to Fort Benning. He whispered her name under his breath. Rowe. Barely loud enough for the man beside him to hear. The sergeant next to him froze mid-motion. That same name triggering a different memory of printed manuals and diagrams, stamped with Army Marksmanship Unit insignia. He muttered that he had seen her name on the wind reading modules they all studied, but never questioned. Down on the line, Tessa's shots kept coming in perfect rhythm, each one landing dead center. The spotter's voice trembled now, not from disbelief, but reverence. She's not just good, he said quietly. She wrote the method we use. The captain's face lost all trace of pride. His arms dropped to his sides as he watched the woman he had dismissed earlier control the range with unbroken calm. Around him, Marines traded glances, realization spreading from one to the next until the entire firing line stood a little straighter. The lieutenant colonel leaned toward the captain and confirmed it, saying she once led the wind clinics at Benning, the same ones their instructors had quoted for years. The sound of her rifle carried over the sand, sharp and clean, each impact like punctuation to the truth they had just learned. 98, 99, 100. Her 100th shot hit the steel plate with the same centered precision as the first. The next one followed. 101. As if the rifle itself refused to stop until her point was made. She lifted her head from the stock and blinked against the sunlight. Not smiling. Not triumphant. Just still. No one cheered. The sound that filled the range wasn't applause, but the quiet rustle of people realizing they had just witnessed mastery. A legend who had taught their teachers, standing again where she belonged, speaking the language of precision without saying a word. The last echo of her final shot drifted into the distance, swallowed by the heat and the hum of the desert air. Tessa stayed prone, her cheek still against the stock, eyes fixed through the scope, as if waiting for the sound to settle into silence. The steel plate downrange stood still, marked only by dust and sunlight. For a long moment, no one spoke. The lieutenant colonel in the bleachers straightened, took off his cover, and raised his hand in a crisp salute toward her position. The gesture was deliberate, carried by years of service, and something deeper than rank. The sound of movement spread across the range. As others rose from their seats, Marines in uniform stood one after another, mirroring the salute in quiet unity. The captain hesitated for half a second, his rifle still in hand. Then he lowered it, squared his shoulders, and brought his hand to his brow, the same way the colonel had. The air was still heavy with gunpowder and sunlight, but it carried a weight of respect that no one dared break. Tessa finally moved, her body relaxing as she reached forward, opened the bolt, and cleared the rifle. The click of the mechanism was soft but final. She placed the weapon gently on the bench, brushed the dust from her sleeves, and stood. The lieutenant colonel walked toward her, his boots crunching over the gravel. He stopped a few paces away, his salute lowering into a nod. On behalf of every marksman who's ever missed, he said quietly, "Thank you." Tessa looked at him with the calm of someone who never expected gratitude. "It was only physics," she answered. "You all taught the rest." His lips lifted in a small, knowing smile. Around them, no one moved. No one clapped. The salute remained, silent and steady. The truest kind of thanks a soldier could give. The sound of boots and shuffling broke the stillness first. The Marines lowered their hands, but the air still carried that charged quiet, the kind that lingers after something sacred. Tessa reached for the rifle one last time, clearing the chamber, checking the bolt, and wiping the receiver with a small cloth she pulled from her pocket. Her movements were slow and careful, not from fatigue, but from respect. When she was done, she turned and handed the rifle back to the captain. He stepped closer than before, his voice lower, roughened by humility. He thanked her for reminding them to listen to the wind. She smiled, faint and honest, the kind of smile that held no pride. "The wind is always talking," she said softly. "People just forget to hear it." The captain nodded, and for the first time that day, he looked less like an officer and more like a student. Around them, the Marines still stood quiet, their faces thoughtful, their eyes following her not as an intruder, but as one of their own. Near the vendor tent, Mr. Dale appeared, his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes red but proud. He told her that even if he had told everyone who she really was, no one would have believed him. She chuckled under her breath. "Better that way," she said, picking up her water tray again. As she walked toward the parking lot, the sound of conversation returned in low tones. In the bleachers, a father leaned toward his son and said that the woman who once sold him nails just taught every Marine a lesson they'd never forget. The boy nodded, staring out toward the range as the dust settled, the world returning to its hum. Softer now, as if paying its own kind of respect, the sun sank low over the Arizona desert, spilling deep golden red across the flats. The noise from the range faded behind her, replaced by the low hum of the wind moving through open space. Tessa sat on the tailgate of her old pickup, boots dusted pale, hands resting quietly on her knees. The warmth of the day clung to her sleeves, and the air carried that clean scent of powder and earth. From far off, a Marine shouted that she had hit all 101. The sound rippled through the range, followed by one last cheer that rose and fell like a wave. Tessa smiled faintly, her eyes still on the horizon. The light caught the edge of her profile, soft and calm. She whispered to herself that it was never about showing anyone. It was about remembering who you are when you take the shot. The words drifted into the evening wind, caught for a moment, then gone. Above the range, the flag stirred once, snapping gently against the dying light, as if saluting the quiet skill that had just spoken louder than any rank. The hum of the desert deepened, and the steel plates downrange still held their silent glow where her bullets had struck. Some heroes no longer wear uniforms, but the discipline and patience remain in their hands and hearts. Their legacy isn't written in medals or ribbons, but in the way they remind others what true mastery looks like. The kind earned through respect, humility, and work done well, even when no one is watching.